They say the 1930s was a time of dust and hunger. In America, hope was a luxury no one could afford. Imagine a road that never ends, a road filled with lonely men carrying their whole lives in a single dirty bag. These men didn't have homes, they didn't have families. They were like ghosts drifting from one farm to another. But then, you see these two, George and Lenny. George is small, sharp, and his eyes are full of a tired kind of wisdom. Lenny is a giant, a mountain of a man, with the innocent smile of a child. In a world where everyone was alone, they had a secret. They had each other. "Tell me, George," Lenny's voice would rumble like distant thunder. "Tell me about the rabbits." George would look at the stars and sigh, his heart heavy with a dream he knew was impossible. "We're gonna have a house, Lenny, our own place, where the rain can't touch us." "And the rabbits?" Lenny would ask, his big eyes glowing with hope. "I get to tend the rabbits?" "Yeah, Lenny, you'll have all the soft things you ever wanted." It was a beautiful lie, or maybe it was the only thing keeping them alive. But George knew something Lenny didn't. Lenny was too strong for this world. He had the strength of a lion, but the heart of a dove. And in a world this cruel, that is a very dangerous thing. "Lenny," George whispered as the fire died down, "if anything goes wrong, find the river. Hide in the bushes." He didn't know then, but that river would be the last place they would ever be together. The next morning, the dust of the road turned into the gray walls of the ranch. It wasn't a home, it was a place where men sold their lives for a few dollars. The bunkhouse smelled of old tobacco and unwashed clothes. It was a house full of strangers who didn't even know each other's last names. They met an old man named Candy. He was broken, just like the ranch. He had only one hand and an old gray dog that could barely walk. "The boss is sore," Candy whispered. "He was expecting you yesterday." Fear crawled up George's spine. The boss was a man with a heavy heart and suspicious eyes. He looked at George and Lenny like they were a problem to be solved. "Why are you helping him?" the boss barked at George. "I've never seen a guy take so much trouble for another man." In this world, looking after someone else didn't make sense. It only made people suspicious. Then the door swung open, and in walked the storm. His name was Curly. Curly was the boss's son, a small man with a giant ego. He looked at Lenny's massive shoulders, and his hands turned into fists. He was like a little dog trying to bite a lion. "Answer when you're spoken to," he shouted at Lenny. Lenny didn't move. He didn't breathe. He was a giant, but he was terrified of the anger in that small man's eyes. When Curly left, the air felt thick. "Listen to me, Lenny," hissed George. "That man is trouble. He's a spark, and you're a forest. If you let him touch you, everything we've worked for will burn to the ground." But the spark wasn't the only danger. Suddenly, a flash of red appeared in the doorway. It was Curly's wife. She didn't have a name on that ranch. She was just the wife. She was pretty, and she was bored. And a bored woman on a ranch full of lonely men is a dangerous thing. She looked at Lenny, and Lenny looked back with the eyes of a child looking at a forbidden toy. "I'm looking for Curly," she said. Her voice was like honey, but George heard the sting. When she left, George grabbed Lenny. He shook him until Lenny's eyes cleared. "Don't you even look at her," George cried. "She's a rat trap, Lenny. She's a trap made of red silk. If you step in it, there's no getting out." "I don't like it here," Lenny sobbed. "It's mean here, George. Can we go now?" George looked at his empty pockets. "We can't, Lenny. We stay until we have the money." Just stay quiet. Just be invisible." But as the sun set over the ranch, George felt a cold wind. The trap was already set, and they were already inside. A few nights later, the bunkhouse was quiet, but it was a heavy, aching silence. Old Candy was lying on his bed. His old gray dog was at his feet. The men were tired of the smell. "He's no good to himself," a man named Carlson said. He pulled out a heavy pistol. "I'll put him out of his misery. He won't even feel it." Candy looked at the ceiling. He didn't say a word. He couldn't. In this world, if you're too old to work, you're better off dead. A single shot rang out in the darkness outside. Bang. The silence that followed was worse than the shot. Candy turned his face to the wall. He was looking at his own future. One day, he would be the dog, and no one would care. George and Lenny were sitting in the corner. They started talking about the place. "We'll have our own kitchen," George whispered. "We'll have a garden with thick cream on the milk from our own cows." Candy sat up. His eyes were wet. "Is there really a place like that?" George was careful. "Maybe. Why do you ask?" "I got money," Candy said, his voice shaking. "I got $300 saved up. I lost my hand on this ranch, and they gave me some cash. I can't work much longer. If I give you my money, could I come with you?" George stopped breathing. The dream wasn't a ghost anymore. It was real. It was sitting right there. "With your money," George whispered, "we could buy that house next month." They sat in the dark, stunned. For one beautiful minute, 3 lonely men were no longer alone. They were a family. But the world doesn't like happy endings. The door crashed open. Curly came in like a wild animal. He was looking for a fight. He was looking for someone to hurt. He saw Lenny. Lenny was still smiling, thinking about the garden and the rabbits. "What are you laughing at, you big son of a—" Curly didn't wait for an answer. He began to smash his fists into Lenny's face. Lenny didn't fight back. He just stood there, blood leaking from his nose, crying like a lost child. "George, make him stop." But Curly kept hitting him, trying to destroy the giant. "Get him, Lenny," George yelled. "Don't let him do it." Lenny reached out. He didn't punch. He just grabbed Curly's hand. He squeezed. You could hear the bones snap like dry sticks. Curly's face went white. Lenny didn't let go. He was terrified. And a terrified giant is the most dangerous thing on earth. When he finally let go, Curly's hand was a mess of broken skin and crushed bone. "I didn't want to," Lenny sobbed. "George, I didn't want to hurt him." Lenny was looking at his own hands. He looked at them like they were monsters attached to his body. The dream was still alive, but the blood on the floor was a warning. The world was coming for them, and it was coming fast. It was Sunday afternoon. The sun was lazy, shining in long lines through the barn. Outside, the men were laughing. You could hear the sound of horseshoes hitting the dirt. Clink, clink. It sounded like life was good. But inside the barn, the air was thick and heavy. Lenny was sitting in the hay. At his feet lay the little puppy. The puppy was dead. Lenny's big hand stroked its fur, his eyes filled with a child's tears. "Why did you have to die?" he whispered to the tiny body. "I wasn't being mean to you. I was just petting you. But you tried to bite me and I I just squeezed a little." Lenny wasn't just crying for the dog. He was crying for the farm. He was crying for the rabbits. "George is going to be so mad," he sobbed, hiding the dog under the hay. Then a shadow fell across the floor. It was Curly's wife. She was wearing her red dress. She looked at Lenny's sad face. "What you got there, big guy?" Lenny tried to hide his hands. "George says I ain't to talk to you. He says you're trouble." The girl sat down beside him. She didn't look like trouble. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had forgotten how to smile. "I get lonely too," she said. Her voice was soft and empty. "Nobody ever talks to me on this ranch. I could have been a star, Lenny. I could have been in the movies. But look at me now, living in the dirt with a man I hate. Two broken souls, sitting in the dust, sharing their secrets." "I like to pet soft things," Lenny whispered. The girl smiled. Well, who doesn't? She took his huge, rough hand and put it on her head. "Feel my hair, Lenny. Go on. It's like silk." Lenny's fingers began to move. He liked the feeling. It was so soft, so perfect. He began to stroke it harder. "Don't mess it up," she laughed. But Lenny didn't stop. His hand was like a machine. "Let go. You're hurting me." She tried to pull away. She started to scream. Lenny's heart started to hammer. Panic is a dangerous thing in the body of a giant. "Please don't," Lenny begged. "George will hear you. He won't let me tend the rabbits." He put his hand over her mouth. He shook her, trying to make the noise stop, trying to save his dream. Crack! The screaming stopped. The barn went silent. The girl's head fell back like a broken doll. Lenny looked at her. She looked like she was sleeping, but her eyes were staring at nothing. "I done a bad thing," Lenny whispered into the silence. "A real bad thing." He remembered the river. He remembered the bushes. He ran out into the afternoon sun. Behind him, in the barn, the girl lay still in the hay. The red dress was the only color in the gray dust. The men were still laughing outside. The horseshoes were still hitting the dirt. They didn't know yet. They didn't know that the world had just ended.
The sun was sinking behind the Gabalin Mountains. The valley was filling with shadows. By the Salinas River, the water was deep and green. A heron flew slowly over the quiet pool. Lenny was there. He was sitting by the bushes, shaking like a cold dog. "I'd done a bad thing," he kept whispering to himself. "George is going to be so mad." He looked at the water. He expected to hear George's angry voice. He expected to be shouted at. Suddenly, the leaves moved. George stepped out from the trees. His face was as pale as a ghost. "George!" Lenny cried, his voice full of relief. "I'm sorry, George. I'd done another bad thing." George didn't yell. He didn't get angry. He just sat down in the sand. "It's okay, Lenny," George said. His voice was so thin it almost disappeared in the wind. "It doesn't matter now." In the distance, they heard the sound of dogs. They heard Curly's men shouting in the woods. They were coming with guns. They were coming for blood. And George knew it. "Are you going to leave me, George?" Lenny's lip began to tremble. "Am I going to have to go away?" George looked at his best friend, the only person who truly loved him. "No," George whispered. "Never." He reached into his pocket. He pulled out the heavy pistol he had taken from the ranch. His hand was shaking so hard the gun looked like it would fall. He took a deep breath. "Lenny," George said softly, "look across the river. Can you see the place?" Lenny turned his head. "Where, George? Can we see the farm now?" "Yeah," George said. "Look over there and I'll tell you. We're going to get that place soon." Lenny smiled. He looked at the dark mountains, imagining the green grass and the little house. "Tell me about the rabbits, George." "We're going to have a garden," George began, his voice breaking. "And you'll have a big cage full of soft, furry rabbits, and no one will ever be mean to you again." The voices of the men were getting louder. They were almost there. "We're going to live off the fat of the land, Lenny, just you and me." Lenny laughed with pure joy. "Let's go there now, George. Let's go to our little place." "I am," George whispered. "I'm taking you there right now." George raised the gun. He pointed it at the back of Lenny's head, right where the spine meets the brain. He looked away for a second. His eyes were blinded by tears. He loved Lenny more than his own life. But he knew, if he didn't do this, the world would destroy Lenny. He had to save him from the pain. "You're my best friend, Lenny," George sobbed. "You always were." Lenny was still smiling. He was thinking about the rabbits. He was finally happy. Crack! The sound of the shot ripped through the quiet evening. Lenny fell forward into the sand. He didn't feel a thing. He died in the middle of his dream, with a smile on his face. The man ran out of the bushes. Curly looked at the body. "You got him," he said. "Good job." But Slim walked over to George. He saw the gun in George's hand. He saw the light go out in George's eyes. Slim sat down in the sand next to him. "You had to do it, George," Slim whispered. "I swear, you had to." George didn't answer. He watched the river flow by. He was a man again, but he was a man with no soul. The dream was buried in the sand. The garden was gone. The rabbits were gone. In a world full of dust and loneliness, George was finally, truly alone.